Okay. With that, I will stop sharing and give the word to our coordinator, Dimitris. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Julia. Just give me a second to share my screen. Okay, I guess you should be able to see the presentation now, also in full screen mode. Uh, uh, Welcome everyone. Thank you very much for your interest, for your time, for taking the time to be here and to attend this open day. My name is Dimitris Koutas. I'm a researcher at Athena Research Center in Greece, and I'm the coordinator of the project. So for the next few minutes, I will try to provide a brief overview about the project so that we have some context, and then our colleagues from Vista will go into more details about the applications in Pilot B. Um, So first of all, just to start with some basic official information about the project itself. Um, the full title, as you can see here, is Spatio-temporal Linked Data Tools for the Agri-Food Data Space. The project is funded under a call for technologies for data management. And this is also reflected in the title. As you can see, we're talking about data tools. We have emphasis on geospatial data and time series, which apparently relates a lot to Earth observation, which we will be discussing also in the presentations afterwards. And although we aim to provide tools that are as generic as possible, our emphasis in the project and in the context of our specific pilots and use cases are drawn from the agri-food sector. Which we believe is quite important, with a lot of impact and with many data challenges based on both the volume of the data, the heterogeneity of the data, and the variety of applications. The project has a duration of 36 months. And as you can see here, it is actually getting close to the end. So currently at this stage, I can say that we are in a good position with the development of the tools. The platform and the tools have started to become more mature, and actually we are very much into evaluating the platform and the tools in the context of the pilot applications. You can find, of course, more information about the project and the results on the website. And also here, as you can see, we have a consortium consisting of 9 partners from several different countries, focusing on different activities, so there are complementary skills and expertise. For example, we have partners focusing more on the development of the platform itself, or other partners focus on the tools that comprise the STELAR toolkit, and of course on the pilot applications and the use cases. And apparently, we also emphasize on our dissemination and exploitation activities. Before going into what we do in the project, just to talk a little bit about the challenges that we are trying to address. And as you know, nowadays, the discussion is usually around artificial intelligence. However, what we often tend to neglect, let's say, is the fact that the success of AI applications depends on a very large extent on the appropriateness and the quality of the data that is being used. So there is an entire pipeline up to the point of actually getting into developing an AI application or training a machine learning model. And this involves several steps that have to do with things like data discovery, like finding appropriate data for the task, data integration, which involves combining data from different sources, and data readiness, which includes things like quality of data or data bias and so on. In all these stages, there are many challenges. You can see some examples that are listed here. For example, how to describe the data in such a way that someone can easily determine if a data set is appropriate for a model to be trained or a task to be performed. How to deal with different with heterogeneity, different, for example, spatial or temporal granularities and frequencies and so on when combining data from different sources, or how to deal with data augmentation if you don't have a lot of data to train the model. So there are a variety of challenges across this entire spectrum. And through the project, as we will discuss next, we try to develop some tools that help to make it easier for a data scientist to deal with these challenges. Um, in this context, our vision in the project is to develop what we call a knowledge lake management system, or a KLMS for short, that supports data scientists in making their data, as we call, fair. Fair here means findable, accessible, interoperable, and reusable, and AI ready. And this KLMS essentially has two main pillars. On the one hand, it includes the platform itself, which is a set of components for publishing and searching for data sets and for collecting and managing metadata and presenting them in a structured form by means of an RDF graph. And on the other hand, the KLMS toolkit, which comprises a set of tools that facilitate different tasks related to the challenges that I mentioned before, like describing data, interlinking data, and annotating and augmenting data. And we have a series of pilots um, with several use cases that give us both the motivation and requirements, but also the chance to evaluate these tools and see the impact that we can get using real world data and real world problems from this sector. Um, a few words about the platform. The main goal here is to make it easier for data scientists to track the performance in terms of metrics and parameters of their workflows, because typically a data scientist has to perform several steps when executing a certain task, like collecting data, linking data, training models, and so on. So in such a workflow, every step performs certain actions using certain tools. These tools have some input and output data, but also some configuration parameters and some metrics. And it is important to keep track of all this metadata of a workflow in order to be able both to debug and find problems or solve problems when they occur and so on, but also to optimize workflows and achieve better performance. So essentially what the platform aims to do is to provide a streamlined way to collect as automatically as possible such kind of metadata, organize them, and make it available for comparisons and for insights that eventually help to optimize the workflows. In terms of the toolkit, as I mentioned, we have a series of tools. This is not a final and exhaustive list, but most of the tools that we develop are here. I will not go into details about everything, but as you can see, there are tools that support different kinds of operations. For example, for discovering data sets, we have a data profiler or a synopsis data engine that provides summaries for data sets. For interlinking, we have tools that perform schema matching and entity matching. We have tools for aligning time series by performing imputation of missing values, performing also data fusion and finding correlations. And we also have tools for annotation, like extracting named entities, performing field segmentation or crop classification, and so on. I will also refer very briefly to the pilots, but then we will go into more details about pilot B for this session. Regarding the other pilots, we have in pilot A emphasis on food entity extraction. Here we are dealing with food recalls, incidents that describe in textual format what has happened, and one of the main challenges here is to extract structured information about the context of the event. What was the product that was recalled? Why? What was the hazard? What was perhaps the brand that was involved? When it happened? And such kind of things. And here the emphasis is on using generative AI techniques to extract such kind of information from text. In pilot B, which we will discuss about more in this open day, the goal focuses on early crop yield prediction. And we are looking into this problem from different scales, let's say, both at the local level, which focuses on providing better information for farm management, but also at a larger scale, like a whole country, for example, which is very useful for providing, for instance, early warnings about food shortages and so on. And last but not least, in Pilot C, we have use cases from the area of precision agriculture. Again, we have several use cases here. And for instance, one of the things that we are trying to do is to facilitate the computation of suitability maps, which provide indications and suggestions about, again, which crops to grow and so on. And with this, I will conclude this brief introduction about the project. Again, thank you very much for your attention. And if you have any questions, I will be very glad to answer at the end.
Thank you, Dimitris. We can give the word to Silke.
Yes. Very good. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
Very good. Hello, everyone, also from my side. My name is Silke Mikdal. I'm one of the two managing directors of Vista, and we are a commercial company. We're based in Munich, in Germany. And as you already heard, we're leading Pilot B in STELAR. So I wanted to give you a little bit of background of who are we, what are we doing, what is our experience, where are we coming from going into STELAR. So our focus area is the water, food, energy nexus. We want to be a part of the future. We want to nourish the future. We want to make sure that the resources we have on this planet and water, food, and energy here are often conflict areas, that they're used as efficiently as possible for the people so that we have a more resilient society and a more resilient agricultural system. How do we do that? We do that on different scales, as Dimitri has also already mentioned with our pilot. Oh, come on. Yeah, here we go. So we have different core competencies and different scales. So one that you're going to hear a lot about today, so I'm only mentioning it very shortly here, is the harvest and yield prediction. This is one of the things we do very well, but we also do a lot of smart farming. So we have a lot of services where we look at the fields from the satellites and see what is going on there, how are the crops growing. We're monitoring that, and we're giving advice and decision support directly to the farmers to see, okay, how much fertilizer is actually needed here, how much irrigation is needed here. That is on the field level, or the in-field level. You can see site specific, but we also do crop monitoring and risk management on a large scale, where we can see, okay, how are the crops developing? Like, for example, all over Germany, is there water stress because it hasn't rained enough? This is a problem that we're going to have again this year, because we had the driest March in Germany that was ever recorded. So we're already starting the year with a drought. So how does that affect the plants? That is something that's also our core competency. And then last but not least, of course, also sustainability services, and within sustainability services, also carbon farming as a measure to mitigate climate change. How do we do this? We use satellite data and modeling. Satellite data has the advantage that it is globally available. So you can use the same approaches globally. You can transfer them relatively easily. I say relatively because, of course, we have different agricultural management systems. We have different crop types in different areas of the world. So we still have to parameterize for different areas, but there's a lot of information in the satellite data that we can use. What you see here is optical data. These are multispectral data sets from Sentinel-2. Sentinel-2, A, B, and now also C are the main workhorses, I would say, for agriculture. They're Copernicus satellites from the EU, so the data is free of charge. It has a 10-meter resolution, and as you can see, it has quite a few spectral bands. So I showed that on the right side here because I didn't know how much background information all of you have about remote sensing. So if you look at the right side of the screen, there's this little part from 400 to around 600, 650 nanometers that's called visible light. That's what we see with our eyes. The satellites see much more. They see this whole infrared part. And as you can also see, the spectrum you can see there is a plant spectrum. Vegetation actually has a lot more differences in these longer wavelengths in the infrared. You can see things like the nitrogen uptake, the leaf area, the water content of the plants. And you can also see this again when you look at the left side at the spatial pictures. You can see that sometimes the fields look more or less uniformly dark in real colors because they have a lot of green, and this is at some point you can't differentiate it anymore. But if you look into these false color images that include the bit infrared, then suddenly you can see a lot of structure again, and that shows you that you really see different things in the different wavelengths. We know this, we use this information, and we know it on a physical base. So we know how do plants interact with the sunlight. We know what is the interaction in the atmosphere. We have to correct for that because the atmosphere is not what we want to look at. We want to look at the surface. And then we know how do plants grow, so land surface processes. So we use a lot of physically based modeling and only a tiny part of AI on top of it. And this is real big data processing. We have 2 petabytes of data in our storage right now. This is a lot. So if we have we have in-house processing chains, how we someone has their microphone on.
Making sure we're not rounding out to our lower.
Okay, thank you. We're getting the optical data from cloud structures. We then we correct for the atmospheric influences. We classify, see where is the valid pixels, where we can actually classify the land use, and where are the clouds and cloud shadows, which are not valid pixels. And then we retrieve plant parameters to get a time series. I'll give you a short example here, just to show you how this looks like. This is a time series north of Munich. Our mother company, BayWa, is north of Munich, so you can see the little but for their headquarters. And this is how the crops developed there from March to July. And then we looked at 3 different winter wheat pixels there, where we knew these are winter wheat fields, and we looked at how do they develop. And what we see from the satellites is we can see the temporal development of the leaf area. So how much green is there? How much green biomass? And you can see these 3 fields develop rather differently. And you can also see the yield that came out of that in the end. And you can see that this leaf area development has a, already with you just looking at it visibly, you can see that it has a correlation with the yield. But of course, leaves and above ground biomass is not all that you need to see how much yield comes out, because the plants, of course, they have the leaves and the stems and the but they also have roots in the ground that you need to get water from the ground. So what you need to do is you need to model this because you can't see it from satellite data. And we have our ProMint model here, which we have developed for 30 years, a long time together with the Ludwig Maximilians University in Munich. And that model simulates the energy and water, the carbon and nutrient cycle. So it really simulates all the land surface processes. It is a fully spatial model. You can see on the left side just the model running and showing how does winter wheat phenology develop in Europe over time. And you don't need to know what the individual phenological stages are here, but basically what you can see, we're starting out in Spain And we're slowly working our way to the Baltics in terms of how the phenology develops. This model is well scientifically proven. We have validated it a lot. It is scientifically quite advanced, and it has been proven in different areas all around the globe. So this is the model by itself, but how does this go together now with the satellite data? And for this, we use a technology that is satellite data assimilation. So in the beginning of the year, or with the sowing of the crop, we start running the ProMet model. It is driven by metrology, and basically gives us best case scenarios. It has land management features, so we can also vary the land management, and then we get different scenarios. Then we have a satellite image. That satellite image focuses us basically like a lens, because at that moment in time, we know how the leaf area above ground looks like. And then we can start from that point on and calculate with the model again. And we do that several times so that we have a time series of satellite data coming in. This can be from one satellite, it can also be from several satellites, as you can see here. And every time we focus a little more and we get a little closer to what was actually happening on the field until at the end of the year. We have a very, very good knowledge of what has happened and how the plants grew in all of their different plant compartments, roots and grains and leaves and everything, and then have a yield forecast. And then we can compare this yield forecast with a yield map. In this case, this is one from a combine harvester, so from the tractor, and can see how well we reach this. This is something that we've done for a long time, both on the field scale and on the European scale, and we have a service for that. That is our starting point for STELAR. It's the Ypsilon Yield Prediction from Satellite Service, which is a European-wide forecast for wheat, barley, maize, and rapeseed, which in different regions shows the yield prediction for different years, and it is well validated for the last few weeks before the harvest. What we want to do in STELAR now, and that's why it's called early yield predictions, is we want to go a step further. We want to say, okay, what if we want to know how the yields will develop even earlier in the year? How can we get there? What tools do we need? And these are the tools that are being developed in STELAR. And with that, I stop my little introduction and give over to my colleague Solveig, who will tell you the status of our pilots in STELAR. Thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Silke. Let me share my screen. All right, you should be able to see my presentation now. Thank you for joining us today for the outcomes of the Pilot B or the crop growth predictions. As Silke just mentioned, our goal is to do crop growth predictions even earlier than what we currently do with our regular processes. And we have two main challenges in yield predictions or in crop growth predictions in agriculture. First one is that we need consistent information for decision-making processes, which means we need time series that have as much data as we can get. We need information on crop types, we need information on field boundaries and so on to have a really good basis for running a ProMet model. A second point is that plant growth is a very dynamic process. So with every update of the satellite data that we get, we see a lot of changes. And sometimes we have clouds in our data, which means we essentially have data gaps because we can't see through clouds with our optical data, which also means we need full time series, we need up-to-date information, and so on. So the goal really is to have yield predictions as early as possible with data that is as good as possible. Our pilot is split up into two use cases. We have a small scale use case and a large scale use case. For the small scale, we collaborate with farmers that we know from former projects or people that we have worked with before. And for that use case, we already have a little bit of information. We know the field boundaries, we know the crop types, and since we're applying the data to previous years, we also have information on the yield for each field. This means that we can use this information to optimize farm management measures and to really test the STELAR tools for those kind of applications. The second use case is more in the concept of food security through early warning. So we look at larger areas. We look at whole countries or subparts of a country, and we have a lot of data. We have a large time series, and we know a lot less than we do for the first use case. We have to go look for our crop types because yield prediction is always done crop type specific. We need to go look for field boundaries. So whenever we want to try to find our crop types, you already know what fields they're in and do a subset of a pixel selection so we don't have to run everything. And even though we're working with a lot of data, we can still try to avoid data overhead. All right, so the how. The how is essentially the tools that are being built within the STELAR project, the tools that we test within the pilot, the tools that are created to improve the data for agricultural purposes. So first up, we have the EO data fusion, where we try to combine multi-sensor information through fusion processes. We have the time series imputation, where we want to improve the time series continuity by using deep learning models. We have the field segmentation that we use to improve knowledge base through the analysis of spectral information from different satellites. And finally, we have the crop type information that we always need because yield information is always being processed yield crop type specific. As a side note, I will not be going into details on the STELAR tools, but we have a second open day coming up in May, and you're very welcome to join that too. Okay, so the data that is being processed within STELAR or within our pilot through the STELAR tools, it's all geospatial data. In our case, specifically, it's satellite data. So the two most important parts of this are leaf area index from optical satellites. Leaf area index is essentially a proxy for plant health, for plant development, for biomass development. And the second one is spectral information. So the figure that you can see over here, just get the pointer, is, so why this is important is we estimate our green leaf area index over a time series. And we know that we have differences in plant development. And what you can see here is the LAI over time and the spectrum for 3 different crop types at the LAI maximum. So the LAI maximum is where the plant has its highest amount of leaf area. So evapotranspiration is highest. We can see the most of the plant, and that is already a very good indicator of what the final yield might be. And what you can see up here is that in this first part of the spectrum, so these 3 columns are the bands of, so the parts of the spectrum that the Sentinel-2 satellite detects and that sits within the wavelengths that we can see. And everything beyond that is information that we can't see with our eyes, but that the satellite can see. And what you can see here too is that the most part information between the different crop types, which in this case are grain maize, sunflower, and soybean, becomes more evident in the larger wavelengths in the spectrum. Okay, and why the LAI? So as Silke mentioned, we update our yield predictions through the season. And when we feed it into the crop growth model, which is also something that we do with the information that we get from STELAR, we get phenological information. And up here in the first row, you see the LAI from a satellite data across the season. the LAI that's being output by Promet. So Promet can do forward modeling or does forward modeling with the input data that that it simulates. And from that, we can see how, given the knowledge that we already have up to a certain point in time, how the phenology develops over time. And the phenology here is the BBCH scale, which means that crop growth or plant growth starts somewhere here. We have the LAI max at BBCH 60, and we have full plant development or crop development at BBCH 89. And that is usually the point at which a crop type gets harvested. So in the case of winter wheat, that would be the end of beginning of August in Central Europe, and for grain maize, it's more towards September, October. Okay, so our study area. So we decided to go with a different kind of study areas to really test how the STELAR tools will behave in different regional scenarios. For a first use case, the small scale one, as I mentioned, we collaborate with farmers in Germany, and we get assistance from farmers they're set in Hessen and Germany and central Germany. We have a few different fields, a few different crop types, but we can look in the entire field. We can take a look at how the in-field variability behaves across the season, and if a certain crop type is grown on a single field over multiple seasons, we can also see the behavior of that. The second use case is a much larger use case. We decided to do the validation and evaluation of this use case at the level of NUTS 2 regions, which is a sub-national level in the European nomenclature. One is set in Austria, explicitly Upper Austria. And in case you're not familiar with satellite data, it is always, data uptake is done in tiles. So we have more or less large photographs, and the areas are very differently. We have the Upper Austria area that is covered by 4 Sentinel-2 tiles and has a whole lot of mountain ranges. And we have the area in France in Aquitaine, which is covered by 11 Sentinel-2 tiles, which also means a lot more data that needs to be handled and is closer to the Atlantic. For both use cases, we want to look at different crop types. So we plan on just as it's easy, so we want to apply everything to grain maize, winter wheat, winter barley. Later on, I will show you the results or first results on winter wheat only. But to elaborate a little bit further on use case 2. So the second use case, as I said, is in different geographic regions in Europe. And we do this because we have very different environmental conditions. In Austria, we have small fields, we have the mountains, we have a different kind of growth season. So it starts a little bit later than in France. It is a little bit shorter than in France, and it's just a little bit shifted compared to France. The French data is it's close to Bordeaux. So we have higher temperatures, we have different precipitation patterns, we have larger fields, which means that when we want to calculate the yield on a single field, we have to process a lot more data. This is why we usually do subsets of those fields to get a really robust result. But all in all, both regions represent different kind of challenges that come with the data that we want to use. Okay, so first up, we'll dive right into the first results for a first use case. So these are mostly preliminary results. And what we did was we ran the STELAR tools on data from 6 winter wheat fields in Hessen, Germany. So the farms are set in central Germany, which means we have really rather stable weather, but we still have differences among the fields. The data that was processed was covered an area of 44 hectares in total, and the data, the satellite data that we use comes from Sentinel-2A, 2B, Landsat 8, and Landsat 9. Sentinel-2A and B have a spatial resolution of 10 meters, while Landsat 8 and 9 are more 30 meters. And the Sentinel and the Landsat satellites also, although they are optical, both sets of satellite, or both families of satellites, they need to be fused to have an inherent time series of the LAI. The LAI time series that we eventually got through data fusion and time series imputation covered 50 time points in the date range from February 10th, 2021 and August 30th in 2021. And here you can see what the results actually look like. So the yield that was estimated through feeding the LAI that we received through data fusion, time series imputation ranges between 4.12 tons per hectare and 6.62 tons per hectare, which deviates a little bit from what the farmers originally reported. But what you can see here also is the time series of the LAI across those fields, and also the spatial variability over time. So we start early in the season. This is a LAI data from Sentinel-2, just as an example from Sentinel-2 from April, circa April, end of April, and you can already see that the fields develop differently. So the red areas show a higher LAI, so you're closer to the upper edge, and blue show lower LAI values. And you can see here that we have fields over here that develop a little bit faster than the one over here, for example. When we get to the LAI maximum, so the point of plant biomass where that is the highest, where we have the most amount of evapotranspiration, and that is kind of the point at which we know or have a pretty good idea of what yield usually looks like, or what the yield for a specific field can look like. We see a lot more homogeneous image. We see LAI values that are very high over all of those fields. And when we go to senescence, or to the point where the crops are more or less fully grown, we see that this is a process that deviates between the fields as well. So we have fields that have a drop in LAI a lot faster and a little bit smoother, and we have fields that just go down a little bit slower than the other ones. So all in all, this was the most part of the results for use case 1. For use case 2, we go to a much larger area. We go to more data, we cover a lot more area, and we need to do a little bit more data handling because of the amount of data. So in the small scale studies, we can go really into detail. We can use algorithms that are a little bit more time expensive because we just don't have that much data. We have a lot of data, but we don't need to take care of overhead. When we go to larger areas, we need to consider data overhead and processing chains a little bit more. And what you can see here is sort of part of the field segmentation group classification results. So for Upper Austria, we found 6,000 winter wheat fields which sit in this low elevation corridor. So the low elevation corridor is sits between the Bavarian forest in the north and the Austrian Alps in the south. And this is where actually a lot of the agriculture in Austria happens. And the green boundary here is the NUTS 2 region of Upper Austria. And the time series that we had for these 6,000 fields in respect to Austria was 47 data points in the time series in the time range of February 7th to August 30th in 2023. So we don't only move to a different geographic area, but we also go to a different year entirely, which means we have other meteorological conditions. We have other artifacts like cloud cover that just create a little bit of chaos in data. The LAI that we used in this use case is also from Sentinel-2A, Sentinel-2B, Landsat 8, and Landsat 9, and was run through data fusion and time series imputation. The field boundaries that we used here were estimated through the field segmentation module that uses spectral information from Sentinel-2, but more on this in a few weeks. All right, so as for the yield results, you see here yield maps for part of France and part of Austria. Overall, we found a yield of 5.72 tons per hectare in Upper Austria and 4.91 tons per hectare in Aquitaine in France. And what you can see here really well that even though we are at a larger geographic area, we still have a lot of variability. We are in the same crop type. Both of this is winter wheat fields. Both of this is in 2023, but the amount of yield that we would expect here still differs highly. And what you can see here also is the LAI time series for a subset of LAI time series for the winter wheat fields in Austria, which shows really well that we have sometimes a little bit erratic time series, but all in all, we have a smooth LAI maximum. We see where the crop starts growing really well. We start the maturation of the crop, but we also have a little bit of mess in the data, which is actually quite common in crop type and yield estimations. The BBCH scale that you can hear corresponds to those LAI values. So the BBCH of 60 is around here, which matches the LAI maximum of the same time. And after that, we see the phenology differentiates a little bit further. So we know that due to soil process and meteorology, crops mature at different time ranges. All right, so all in all, we tested our 4 tools from the STELAR tool set. So we have the data fusion that starts off the process. We have the time series imputation that imputes the LAI time series that was fused through the data fusion. We have the field segmentation that uses spectral information to detect fields in satellite data in different areas. And we have the crop classification that finds the crop types that we want to do a yield prediction on. The use cases are set in very different areas in Europe, which means we have different environmental conditions. We have the proximity to mountains and the sea, which means we have different levels of cloud cover. We have different artifacts in the data. We have different observation geometries of the satellite data, which brings challenges to processing the data. We have different amounts of data that we need to handle. But still, we're able to test all the toolsets and show how the tools work for different challenges that we have in agriculture. And with this, I actually conclude my presentation. And yeah, again, I'd like to invite you to the second open day on May 7th, where you learn more about the tools that were built in STELAR. Great.
Thank you very much, Solveig. Okay, so we're coming to our final part of the Vista Open Day, the first one, as Solveig has said, so please feel free to join us on May 7th. We will be promoting the link for the registration on the social media channels of STELAR, so you can find STELAR Project on LinkedIn, and you can register there soon. Now I would just share my screen shortly and give the floor to my colleague, Tatiana. So I believe you can see my screen. You have here a QR code for the stakeholder interest survey, and Tanya, you can explain the rest.
Yes, hello from my side. So thank you very much for joining today's event. We would like to hear your feedback and would appreciate your insights on the Vista ProMed platform, which will be enhanced with STELAR Knowledge Lake Management System tools. So this short survey that you can enter through this QR code, or if you have any challenges accessing the survey, you can also access it through the link that I will share it with you in a chat here. It's a very brief survey. You can fill it in a minute, just so we can hear from which field you're coming from, either agricultural data management, and if your organization can benefit from our tools. If you can give us any feedback on how we can make any additional improvements and so on. So we would really appreciate if you can help us to understand your interest in using this platform. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Tanya. And now to the final portion of our open day. So we're moving on to the Q&A section. We do have one question in our chat. So it's for the Vista team, so for Silke and for Solveig. Instead of LAA, can FAPAR and F-cover also be used for measuring biophysical activity? I give the floor to Silke or Solveig.
Yeah, I can take this if you want, Solveig. So the short answer is yes. So instead of leaf area, you can use it's the fraction of absorbed radiation and the fractional cover of the plants for everyone who's not who doesn't know these abbreviations. You can use these. They are used quite often with medium resolution data. So when you don't know the crop type specifically, or you have a 300 meter pixel or a 1 kilometer pixel where you have different crop types in there, then the fraction of the absorbed radiation gives you a very good overview on the dynamic of the whole biophysical activity in this area without having to specify crop types quite as much. For us, from our side, the leaf area is the parameter we choose because it has the advantage that, for one, it uses the whole wavelength range, so to give a result. So it's quite precise. It doesn't saturate very easily, and we can differentiate it from other crop parameters, from the biochemical parameters like chlorophyll. How much chlorophyll is in the plant and how much leaf area does it have are two independent parameters that share some of the same wavelength areas, but we can still differentiate them. The same with the water content of the plants. That gives us, if we know the crop type, a much more detailed view of the plants. And with a radiative transfer model, and we're using here one that's called SLC, soil leaf canopy, that was developed by Wouter Huuf from the Netherlands and Dr. Heike Bach, our other managing director. You can get a very, very detailed look on the plants. So that's why we use LAI, but of course you can also use FAPAR and F-cover. I hope that answered your question.
Okay, so thank you, Avinash, for your question. If you have a follow-up question, or if anybody else has some questions, you can also unmute yourself and pose the question. Okay, so I'm guessing that there are no questions for now. You can always send your questions in another way to us at STELAR. We have a contact form at our website, and we can forward the questions to our Vista colleagues from Vista. So with that, I would close this session. Thank you to everyone who has participated, particularly to our great presenters. We will be uploading this open day to our channel, so you can always revisit this recording. Thank you, everybody, and have a great day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.